what to make of a film that is being hailed as the best of 2025. This is the Last Picture Show with Rahim Khan, and today I am reviewing Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another. For those of you who aren't willing to sit through me ranting for about 20-25 minutes or however long this particular review is going to be, I'm going to break this down into something really simple. Should you watch this in the cinema? Should you stream it? Or should you skip it? Stream it. I know that this is a movie that was shot in IMAX and sort of like, is on film, and like, as I said, it is being hailed by critics left, right, and center as one of the best, movie of 2025 and one of the best of PTA's filmography. But I feel that as a cinema goer, there is nothing that is sort of essentially rewarded in that cinema experience by watching it sort of like, in a picture house. You could get perhaps that same level of satisfaction or dissatisfaction watching it at home. And I know purists will disagree with me because there is some beautiful cinematography in this movie that, again, sort of was made for the cinema screen. But, and this is an important one, in a film like this that is dealing with sort of weighty matters, that isn't a straightforward sort of action thriller, dramedy, black comedy satire, that is so many things that I think that we've come to expect from the kind of things that PTA does. I think perhaps it is better enjoyed in the intimacy of your own home, because there were points in this movie which runs at perhaps an overstretched 2 hours and 40 minutes where I felt it dragged, where I felt, had I been at home, I could have easily been distracted by something else. And I wish that perhaps PTA, or at least somebody sort of within his circle, had told him, hey man, you don't mean to make such an expansive movie. Sort of like, let's shave it down by about half an hour. So, stream it. Now, of course, I can get into my actual review. Starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Benicio del Toro, Sean Penn, the revelation that is Chase Infiniti. This is loosely adapted from Thomas Pynchon, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, book Vineland, of which PTA, Paul Thomas Anderson, is a fan, and it tells the story of sort of late 2000 revolutionaries who they are fighting the state, and of course they've fallen in love, and the lady of the half, Perfidia Beverly Hills, what a name. I think she's the same actress who was in Nope. She gets pregnant, they have a child, and then, of course, it's the consideration. Do you continue fighting the revolution, or do you start sort of this mini revolution that is a family? Do you start a family that is sort of inexplicably, in this particular case, destined to, go up against the state, the jackboot of the state, to go up against sort of white supremacy? Do you do that? It's a question that at least Perfidia, and not a spoiler, decides to answer for herself by saying, no, I do not want to be a mother. I want to continue being a revolutionary. And during the course of that, she winds up in jail, or at least in custody, and eventually has to rat out her fellow revolutionaries. And so her partner, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, Rocketman Pat is his nickname. Him and his daughter go on the run, pursued by another great name, Stephen J. Lockjaw, Captain Stephen J. Lockjaw, played by, of course, Sean Penn, who peacocks at his best in this movie. This guy is sure to get a supporting, I would say, a best supporting actor nod for this one, because he really chews up the scenery in this movie, and you see that in his lower jaw. Cut to 16 years later, and Lockjaw is being initiated into this white supremacist group known as the Christmas Adventurers Club. And in order for him to be vetted, they ask him a particular question, and that is, do you or have you ever fathered a mixed race child? Not a spoiler, but we'll get to that in a bit. And so sets off this whole series of events, which eventually leads to him chasing after the now grown-up daughter, played by Chase Infiniti, and of course the dope fiend father, Leonardo DiCaprio, who is older but not much wiser. It's a great story. It is perhaps the most relevant movie you will have this year. Relevant because sort of this Trump 2.0, this America that we now see, with sort of these weaponized versions, not to say that ICE were ever nice to begin with, but to see ICE on the streets, the National Guard deployed, immigrants being rounded up, America being a less safer place, particularly if you're not white, then this movie is almost sort of like, sticking the fascists in the eye. Because in this movie, the state is this overbearing, omnipresent force of nature. It is almost godlike in this movie. It appears, it is relentless, it is unsympathetic, and it almost feels totalitarian, which I guess I think a lot of people feel that America is sliding into. Up against them are not perhaps organizations, and I laugh at that because I remember there was this Onion joke recently, sort of on the Onion, where FBI is find it impossible to infiltrate left-wing revolutionary group because they are so disorganized. That's kind of like what I think the Leonardo DiCaprio character is, having fried his brains over the past decade and a half. He's perhaps a shadow of the man he used to be. But now that Sean Penn and his merry band of thugs, the police, are sort of after him and his daughter, he has to pull up his socks somehow and save the day. This movie champions the individual. It champions, it's almost like the Lord of the Rings, the tagline where sort of even the smallest voice, even the smallest person can make a difference. And you see that in sort of all of these, I would say, the heroes of this movie, in all of the people who are trying to fight the state by whatever means. You see that in this fantastic character of the sensei. I'm forgetting his name, Sensei Sergio Carlos or something like that, played by Benicio del Toro, who criminally is not given enough time on screen. I wanted more of the man because he's fantastic as sort of this Harriet Tubman type karate instructor who is a sensei to DiCaprio's daughter, but also kind of has this immigrant underground railroad type thing going on. And, it's people like that. It's people like sort of all of these older, grayer revolutionaries who are still trying to sort of fight their own fight, trying to sort of take it, trying to sort of bring down the system. And you have a lot of these characters and sort of that richness in the characters, in the storytelling, really, really is a credit to Paul Thomas Anderson as a filmmaker, as a writer. because it's peppered with all of these people, and they really add to that sort of like, that tapestry that is being woven here. Even the story itself, I mean, sort of like, it unfolds in the past, but then sort of like, in the present day, as, the hunt begins, and sort of, DiCaprio has to contest with, this tidal force that is Penn and the government, and then also that relationship, which is again in itself perhaps as much of a force as they are, and that is the bond between father and daughter, which I think was beautifully done. The movie is perfectly made, but it is an imperfect movie. It is a movie that is so demonstrative of PTA's craft as a writer, as a filmmaker. There are these wonderful scenes, which you wouldn't expect from a filmmaker like, PTA, because the thing is that sort of in his body of work, we haven't really seen him do sort of like, an action or actiony bits or have set pieces. I mean, his body of work has largely been, I mean, sort of like, either dramas or then, for example, dramedies like Punch Drunk Love or Licorice Pizza. And then, of course, you've had The Master and what's it called? Magnolia, There Will Be Blood, so many of those others. But you've never seen him do a movie like this. And I wonder, let me play devil's advocate here. I wonder if this very same script were given to somebody else. I don't know who that somebody else would have been, but I wonder if they would have made perhaps maybe something a little more sharper. Because I think that's what this movie kind of lacked. Instead of being this sort of like, excoriating, razor sharp kind of like, sort of dissection of what America is today, I think that it is somewhat blunt. The runtime doesn't help it, because the thing is, there are periods like 5-minute scenes, 10-minute scenes where you're just with one set of characters, and then you bring in the other, like, for example, you're with DiCaprio for a while, cut to Sean Penn, and then you're like, oh wait, Sean Penn's still a part of this movie? I mean, that's what happens when you have a movie that's like, almost 3 hours long. Not to say that that's a bad thing, but I think that sort of like, it's hard to perhaps, I don't want to say that it is boring, but there are scenes that tend to overstay their welcome. And when that happens, you feel that sort of, this is where the director should have pulled back and said, okay, wait a second. Maybe, and when I say sharper, maybe, if I cut down a little here, cut down a little there, do this, do that, we would have something that is a little more efficient, that perhaps is able to tell the story in a better way, tell the story without having characters sort of like disappear for scenes on end, or, for example, having the audience feel that perhaps I would have rather have seen more of that guy and less of this guy. That's what I felt, for example, with Benicio, who's a scene stealer. Even Sean Penn, I mean, Sean Penn most definitely is a scene stealer, but there are points at which, I mean, like, he really hams it up. And then I'm like, you know what, cut to something else. I mean, like, sort of, let's get this story moving. Let's like, the kinetic nature of certain scenes is so well done. Like, there's these two really well done scenes. One is, of course, this particular scene in which, in fact, they're both chases. One is where DiCaprio links up with Del Toro, and then sort of this chain of events sort of happens where, what's it called, law enforcement comes in and they have to get rid of, like, what's it called, all of these people. And I don't want to give too much away, but I mean, it's just like, there's this energy to the scene. And it ends in this amazing, sort of pratfall. I won't even give that one away. You guys have to see it. But that kind of scene had verve to it. Similarly, towards the end, in the finale of the movie, in which beautifully shot, I would say, the border between America and the US, it's like, sort of this barren sort of wilderness that sort of like, is kind of reminiscent of the works of Ansel Adams, which he photographed that area quite well. And you have the daughter trying to escape, and sort of you have these undulating roads in the desert, and this chase scene unfolds. Beautiful. The cinematography in this is also beautiful because you have these close-ups of these characters. And that's where I think that's the only point where I would have loved to see it on the big screen in an IMAX. The close-ups are so well done. And it's a credit to the actors. DiCaprio, as always, delivers. Even as this sort of bum of a father, this junkie, if you will, this alcoholic, in this sort of dadcore, like, flannel bathrobe and sort of disheveled look. He's still there for his daughter. He tries his best. Benicio is amazing. Sean Penn is amazing. But I think the real revelation in this is the daughter, played by, again, amazing name, Chase Infiniti. Great name. So, you have all of these elements that, again, are sort of like, cinematic, like, achievements. They are peaks. But it's just I'm not saying it doesn't come together. It's just something that, again, like, there's a scene towards the end of the movie where, like, all is done and dusted. You see Sean Penn's character kind of like, he's, spoiler, he's shot and his, like, SUV goes off and crashes, and you're like, okay, the guy's dead. I don't need to see any more. But there, after all is said and done, you see him coming in this sort of twaddle, like penguin type walk. And then, like, his face is busted up, and he's again trying to be initiated into this white supremacist group. And that sort of is a scene that goes on, and then, they eventually, whatever, and all of that stuff. You didn't need to have that scene. It doesn't really add anything else to the story. Like, if he had died out there in the desert, that would have been closure enough for us as us as audience members, audience as viewers. So that's where I say it's an imperfect movie, but perfectly made. Just two things before I end this one. Watching it, and when I said that the movie is relevant, sort of as a statement against totalitarianism, as a statement against maybe perhaps even fascism. This movie, and I love how Pat's character is watching The Battle for Algiers, another revolutionary movie. There were two songs that sort of kept on playing in my mind when I was watching this. One was, of course, Lord Jamar's. There's a Lord Jamar one. I'm forgetting the particular one. But he's like, what you know about running for miles and not eating for days with your family and giving your 8-year-old an AK-47. And it's against, essentially it's sort of like, taking on the state. And then, of course, Run the Jewel Raps. This one in particular, because the thing is, there's this scene in which they're in this ICE detention center, and in that, I'm forgetting which track it was, but there's that Run the Jewels one where he says it, how Christian is it of you to put kids in cages? So there's that one scene in which, like, they're in that ICE detention center, and you have these kids, immigrant families, in cages, and they're trying to make most of it. They're playing. And you do kind of feel, sort of that this is a statement against this sort of Christianity, because the Christmas Adventurers Club, white supremacists that they are, for them, quoting another character, they're like, if you want to save the world, start with immigration. Close off your borders. Do not be Christ-like. So, shame that those two songs didn't really make it to this movie, to the soundtrack. But yes, do I think this movie is the best of the year? I don't know, I'm going to leave you with that face.